Hello, everyone, and welcome to Shear Line with Eirik Gislason. I am so excited to do this episode live at the Real Deal Forum here at the Metropolitan Pavilion in New York City. And I cannot wait to introduce my guest for this episode, who is perfect for the topic that we're going to cover. Just to remind you, my name is Eirik Gislason. I am an associate broker and team leader of the Excelsior team at Brown Harris Stevens. I'm a master certified negotiation expert. I'm the founder of Archway Partners Coaching, and I'm your host for the Shear Line podcast here on the More Network. Today, we are going to talk about a fantastic topic on negotiation, and that is power. And more specifically, we're going to talk about contractual leverage and the timing of power shifts in negotiation. So in negotiation, we tend to talk about power like it's a fixed thing, static. You've got it or you don't. But that's why understanding power balance and examining the sources of power in any negotiation is so important. In real estate negotiations, when contracts, contingencies, inspections, appraisals, and co-op boards are involved, power isn't safely contained or bottled for one side or the other from start to finish. It shifts, it pivots, and sometimes it hides in fine print. So today, we're unpacking how power shifts during a negotiation and how smart negotiators track, anticipate, and sometimes influence or create those shifts. So in true Shear Line fashion, before I formally introduce my amazing guest, Pierre Debbas, as if the audience needs an introduction of Pierre Debbas, let's examine a few ways that power is used and shifts during the negotiation and due diligence phase. As we know in New York City specifically, we have that 5 to 7 day period during which neither party is obligated nor are they protected until the contract deposit is delivered and contracts are countersigned. That means options and information can shift the power balance and the perception of power. Either party has the ability to walk away or at least bluff that they're walking away, which is power, or either side can use information or options to create a sense of urgency, which is also power. Bottom line, during that period, the side that owns the perception of power, or the better BATNA, has options and therefore the leverage. And now here are a few examples. Number one, the buyer has the inspection performed before signing the contract, which potentially become tools to reopen the negotiation. At this stage, information becomes power. Or the seller informs the buyer that another potential buyer has emerged, or that another buyer has increased their offer in either price or terms, and that gives them the ability to ask the current buyer for more or to demand urgency. And then third, the attorney representing either side negotiates key points of their specific rider, contingency date, the on or about dates, or other key milestones, slightly or significantly shifting power and risk from one side to the other. So these aren't just logistics, they're leverage points. Smart negotiators use timing, deadlines, and contract language to keep pressure where they want it and release it when needed. So with that as our backdrop, it is my absolute pleasure to introduce our guest, Mr. Pierre Debbas, Esquire, partner and founding member of Romer Debbas Law Firm, which is regularly one of the top 3 of all real estate law firms in New York City, as ranked by The Real Deal based on dollar volume of residential and commercial transactions held in New York City. Pierre is frequently quoted and featured in the New York Times, Bloomberg TV, Fox Business, The Real Deal, and the Wall Street Journal, to name a few. And he's regularly a featured lecturer at several of the city's largest law firms. As you all know, the New York City brokerage community leans on Pierre and his firm for insights and intel that keep us at the top of our game. In addition, Pierre has been nominated for Super Lawyers for multiple consecutive years and has been named in New York Magazine's Leaders in the Law as one of the top New York attorneys in New York City. He's a resident of New York City, along with his wife and 2 boys who are 8 and 10. They are diehard New Yorkers and Yankees fanatics. And last, I want to mention this as my personal favorite. You'll argue with me, I'm sure, that your wife and kids are probably more important, but for me, I love the fact that you're a certified New York Department of State teacher of continuing education courses on the subject of residential and commercial real estate. That warms my heart. And on behalf of the industry, I thank you for all of what you do for the industry and for joining me here on Shear Line.
Thanks, Eric. Thank you for both things.
So, before I get into my first question, you know that real estate attorneys, especially attorneys like yourself who deal in the luxury space and therefore higher net worth clients, you live at the intersection of language, liability, and leverage, or power as we like to call it. You understand how power subtly shifts during different stages of the deal sheets, contingencies, due diligence, board approvals, contract signing, as I mentioned earlier. So where do you see power shifting most often in a transaction, and how do your clients use or sometimes miss those moments?
You know, I always say, there's a great saying, negotiation is an art, not a science. And it's an ever fluid evolution on a transaction. And it depends on so many factors, right? Like market conditions. Like right now, we're going through an incredibly tumultuous time with tariffs, political battles, potential global trade wars. The 10-year treasury is fluctuating every single day by gross margins. That all impacts leverage for either party. You know, if we hit a point where you're in the middle of negotiation and rates tick up, the seller's more inclined to take a bird in hand out of fear for what's to come. And a buyer may say, you know what, I don't necessarily have to proceed. The sense of urgency I once had has definitely declined. And that we're seeing that on a day-to-day basis, right? So that can alter the balance of power in a negotiation 3, 4, 5 times over the course of a deal. I mean, over the course of a deal, I mean 5 to 10 days, right? Like in our negotiation process. So, you know, I really do think that you have to be cognizant of what's going on in the world. It's not just the skill set of, I know New York City residential real estate, I know what to look out for in conducting due diligence, I know a form contract. It's far greater than that, right? It's, I know what's going on in the economy. I know what's going on in the news. I know all the macroeconomic factors that go into the consumer's desire to proceed with the deal, right? And you got to take that all into consideration in determining what leverage you have. Yeah. You know, leverage is a funny word because it really depends on, you know, who else is in line, how many people are behind you. I used to say during the financial crisis when we were negotiating deals, I could rewrite a contract A to Z. I could get whatever, I could negotiate for whatever I want.
Right.
And then when the market is a aggressive bull seller's market, I'm lucky to get 20% of what I used to get. I could be the most brilliant lawyer in the world. I can write the greatest provisions. Market conditions dictate our success in negotiability more than anything, right? Yeah. And that really is a God's honest truth. Anybody tells you otherwise, lie.
Now, it's interesting you mentioned that because one of the things that I find really interesting about how we as negotiators approach, obviously we have a power balance. So we approach the negotiation, but we do our best to anchor with as much value as we can, right? So I'm going to ask the other side for as much as I can reasonably ask them, something that is credible and reasonable, but also reflects the power balance that we have. Do you use, even in a situation where maybe the market balance does favor the other side of the transaction, do you use anchoring to say, okay, look, I'm going to ask for these 10 things in hopes that depending on what my power balance is, that I can get 2 of them, 3 of them, 5 of them, as opposed to asking for 1 and getting nothing.
Absolutely. I mean, that's where I say it's an art, right? Yeah. You're not going to go in and say, oh, these are the 3 most important things I want, and these are my only asks. Right. Then you'll get half of them. If you go in and say, hey, these are my 10 asks, and you make it sound like everyone's important material, and you really focus on what's important without relaying that to the other side, that's a successful negotiation. I always say, I've been doing this 20 years now, which I feel, outdates myself a little bit. And you got to really just know what's essential, right? When you do thousands and thousands of deals, lawyers have a horrible habit of negotiating theory. You have to be able to decipher between theory and practical issues. Yeah, it's true. But, at the same token, to talk about like actual examples of what I'm saying, when you're looking, like we're doing a transaction now in the $3 to $4 million range. It wasn't disclosed to us that there's major capital improvements coming on the building. There's a huge assessment to replace the roof. So now we're going back and saying we weren't aware of this when we determined that this is our offer, that we're willing to financially pay for this property. We want a credit of 6 figures. Right. And we're being accused of retrading. But in reality, it should have been disclosed up front. The element of surprise kills all deals. So you talk about like you as a broker, you're asking all the questions in advance. You should, because you want to find out at that stage rather than when it hits my desk. By the time it hits my desk, generally speaking, if something comes out of left field, it shatters consumer confidence and has a lot higher probability of derailing a deal at an earlier stage.
And when that surprise comes, if the other side clearly knows about it,
That's right.
they're making a calculated decision on how they're going to approach it, whether they're not going to mention it, or whether they're going to mention it but kind of sugarcoat it, or whether they're going to be honest with you. And so I think oftentimes as negotiators, we start to get into our own head and think about what is the risk of this deal falling apart. And so we allow the other side to get away with not mentioning it or get away with sugarcoating it, as opposed to going back to them and saying, well, wait a second, you made a calculated decision to not tell us about this. You knew it existed. So now it is right and fair for us now to, first of all, not only take a position where we compensate our client or make sure we protect our client, but also to show you that the trust in this negotiation has faltered or is lost because you didn't tell us. So you set up the future negotiation, so this should not happen anymore. Yeah.
I always say, in reality, most buyers and sellers are hiring real estate professionals in the city. Most of us who do this are going to uncover anything that's out there.
Exactly.
Can you slip into the cracks? Sure, maybe 1 out of 10 times they hire somebody that's not that thorough or isn't familiar with our market. Majority of the time it's going to come up. Just be honest about it. It's the best way of doing it.
Do you have a big move coming up? I'm Scott Nadler with Cross Country Mortgage, and I've got the loan to match your dream home. Whether it's your first or your fifth, I'll make the process quick and easy. Call me today. Let's make it happen.
Hey, it's Stephen Bailey from Roadway Moving and Storage. As an official moving partner of Brown Harris Stevens, we know that your clients deserve more than just a move. At Roadway Moving and Storage, we turn moving into an experience they will love. From specialized services to a white glove treatment, we've got it all covered. When you choose Roadway, you're choosing a peace of mind for your clients. Plus, our referral program is the most rewarding in the industry. Want to learn more? Shoot me an email at steven@roadwaymoving.com or visit roadwaymoving.com.
And you were mentioning, different periods of time, the financial crisis. I remember early on in COVID, I was consuming as much webinar content, as I possibly could. And I can't remember if it was you or Michael, your partner Michael, but it was one of the two of you that talked about how you're to protect buyers, you were actually going from mortgage contingencies to funding contingencies. And I thought that as a negotiator, that was one of those things that I clearly, as an agent, was not thinking about. Like, how do I further protect in case there is a job loss, in case there's a death or something like that? So I thought that was really interesting to change the normal language or the normal course of contracts to really meet that moment.
Well, that's what I'm saying. You have to adapt to what's going on in the market itself. And I mean, during the pandemic, when you take any catastrophic moment in society or in the financial service industry, you don't know. You see, our job is to hedge against risk. You're in a transaction's generally 90 days. What's the risk that take place in those 90 days? And what's the risk a buyer can end up assuming post-closing that we didn't protect them against? And that's the tough thing, because no one has a crystal ball. But whenever you have something that, extreme, you have to say, okay, well, where are the pitfalls here? The pitfalls are a collapse in the financial system, an utter shutting of the brakes, hitting the brakes in terms of lending. I mean, everybody retreated. During COVID, it wasn't really the time where banks were saying, hey, we want to give mortgages to homes in New York City. That shut down, right? So where it could happen, and we saw this in 2008, 2009. I think half of the top 10 home lenders went bankrupt. All those commitment letters they issued, do you think they were worth anything? They weren't worth the paper they're written on. So then our clients all had 10% deposits on the line. How do you protect against that? That's where you have to come up with these creative, you don't want to over-lawyer. It's a balance. That's the thing. The best negotiators are the guys who know the balance between over-lawyering and doing a thorough and diligent job.
Absolutely. I love that. And that is, I mean, there's so much wisdom in that. The fact that you, and I think we all get accused sometimes in our specific role in a negotiation or in a deal, a real estate transaction, of letting ourselves get in the way of that transaction. But if you're constantly using the client as your North Star, their protection, their results, and what is going to minimize their risk, but also get them ultimately what is their goal, and that is to complete that purchase.
Right.
And we oftentimes don't have the same risk tolerance as our clients. So understanding what their risk tolerance is, understanding what they're comfortable with.
Yes.
And I think the best attorneys are able to explain that.
That I couldn't have said it better myself, because I always say our job is to outline the risk, come up with creative solutions to mitigate that risk. It's a client's business decision whether to proceed or not.
Yeah.
I've never told a client in my life, you should not do this. I lay out the information, I lay out the solutions, I highlight any potential pitfalls, and like you said, everybody's risk tolerance is different. It's one of the most subjective aspects of life is your own risk tolerance.
That's right. That's right. Well, from your experience, this is my next question. We went on a great tangent there. So from your experience, how do legal clauses become a negotiation tool in and of themselves?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's funny when you talk to people who are not familiar with the New York market, they're like, all right, I'm buying an apartment. What's entailed in this? I'm like, well, there's about 15 pages of, legal jargon that you have to read through and sign. There's a standard form that the Bar Association approves. There's a rider for one lawyer and a rider for another lawyer, and we argue for 5 days and we make it somewhat fair.
Yeah, right.
I do think that, again, it was kind of like earlier when I mentioned, I'll give you a great example. When you talk about like, okay, I want these 10 things. One of my favorite things is saving clients money. So I always try to negotiate to conduct a mortgage, assignment of mortgage, purchase SEMA, which reduces the mortgage recording tax, which is a substantial sum. We had one scenario where our client was like, I want the whole savings. We have about $50,000 differential. That's real money.
Yeah.
So I went in and we negotiated where the seller's lawyer was negotiating theory. And I'm like, all right, I'll concede on that provision. You give me the mortgage recording tax savings.
Uh-huh.
And she's, okay, fine, that's fair, right? So she won a theoretical protection, which I was able to mitigate because it had something to do with liens. I went on the city's website, I went through the records, and I was able to ascertain that there were no liens. So the provision she wanted, capping the expenditure to remove unconsensual liens, was irrelevant. But she thought she'd protect her client. I called mine saying, hey, I just got you $50,000. Who do you think won, right? Who do you think the client? I mean, look, you save a client $50,000, you have a friend for life.
Yeah, exactly. And frankly, if that protection, theoretical or otherwise, was so important to the other side, hey, if they're willing to trade $50,000 for that protection, that's, in my opinion, when I study collaborative negotiation, our goal is to find win-win solutions.
Yep.
Create value in the transaction. And if that's a way to create value, your client gets $50,000.
Yep.
You've explained that there's very little or no risk that they would be taking on by giving the other side what they want.
That's right.
So they trade something away of absolutely zero or very little value to get something of high value. Meanwhile, the people on the other side, they think what they got was of high value, and if that's what they think, and they're willing to give $50,000 away to get it, then great. Everybody wins. Happy.
I always say the best negotiation is when neither party's happy, they're both content.
That's right.
That's the best negotiation.
That's right. Yeah, everybody's going to give a little bit away. Mm-hmm. There's going to be a zone of possible agreement. How can I get the zone of possible agreement as close to what my client wants as I possibly?
Yep.
Right? Yeah, all right. So what are some common power mistakes you see clients or their agents make when understanding legal timelines in a negotiation?
So, when you try to set arbitrary deadlines and sign, you don't know what's coming up. And whenever you're being arbitrarily pushed to sign, the first thing that jumps in your mind is, what are they hiding? There are time constraints, don't get me wrong. In an aggressive market, multiple offers, you're up against the clock, right? You don't have a choice. So there are circumstances where it's mandatory. But there's a lot of circumstances where it's arbitrarily put. And the moment you're exposed that it was arbitrarily put, then all of a sudden buyer takes a step back and says, I have all the leverage. You were not being forthright, and I'm now going to look for every hole in this I could.
That's amazing. Yeah, and when you get the other side examining every small detail, when you send them on that path,
time kills all deals.
Time kills all deals.
All deals.
That's exactly right. All right, I'm going to ask you one more question on the real estate front, or on the negotiation front. Then we're going to get to our what I like to call our lightning round. I'm going to ask you a few fun questions. Right.
Okay.
So if you had to give one piece of advice to a buyer, a seller, or a real estate agent entering a negotiation today, what would you tell them about understanding the idea of power and the timing of their moves in a negotiation?
Yeah, oh wow, that's a good one. I don't like to focus on power because the good thing about transactional lawyers and transactions in general, you generally have a common interest. You're trying to meet in the middle for the purpose of facilitating the transfer of a property. It's not like litigation where you're trying to cut someone's throat off all the time. So I think that it's important to keep that in mind. It's funny when you have investors come from other markets in the country, like, do you have anything off market? Is there a steal? Is there any distress? I mean, there's no steals in New York City.
Yeah.
I mean, it's 20 years. There's no steals, right? Like, it's the most affluent bubble in the world and one of the most sophisticated, educated markets in the world as well in terms of service providers and clientele. So you're not getting a steal. You got to strike a deal that you think is a fair deal. You got to execute it in a timely manner, and you got to be aware of what's going on in the market. You can't be asking for like. I had a request for a contingency the other day on tariffs. If tariffs slaughtered the stock market, I want to cancel the deal. And I'm like, no one's gonna consent to that, right?
Yeah.
And if I ask that, you're gonna lose all credibility. I have to do what the client instructs me to do, so long as it's ethical. It doesn't breach anything ethical. But I'm like, to be honest with you, it's rather embarrassing.
Yeah.
And this came up in 2016. I had a client look to buy new development. Prior, I wanted the right to cancel the contract, so I think the world's going to end. And I'm like, then you shouldn't be transacting now.
Right.
Because I can't hedge against these risks. Because while it may not sound so crazy to add contingencies, if you don't know that word is not, you can't just be coming up with random contingencies. You're not going to be taken seriously.
Yeah, and how can you define it?
Exactly.
That's great.
This beautiful set here at Studio 1873 is brought to you by the Everset. The Everset provides full-service staging and furniture rental solutions in the New York area. We work with Brown Harris Stevens and many other top real estate firms, staging their homes to sell quickly and at the highest price possible. Our staging is affordable without sacrificing quality or design. For more information, please visit us at staging.theeverset.com or email us at staging@theeverset.com to request a free proposal.
What do you really need to know about buying or selling a home? First, it's serious business, and it's complicated. There's a lot of money on the table, and emotion too. You need an agent who knows the ropes. So, whether you're buying or selling your home, work with professionals who have a mastery of the craft.
So I'm going to move on to our lightning round, and we have some music for our lightning round, as you'll hear on our podcast, and it goes. All right, so we're in our lightning round. All right, when you present or speak, generally, your audience, us, is clamoring for your advice, your guidance, your perspective, and because of that, we rarely get a chance to find out more about you personally. So, first question in the lightning round: can you tell us a bit about what shaped your upbringing and your life in New York City?
Yeah, no. So I was actually born in Manhattan. My parents divorced when I was young. I split time between the suburbs of Washington, D.C. and New York. And as a little kid, I used to go to work with my dad every summer, and all I wanted to do was put on a suit and walk around with a briefcase and look like I'm important in New York City. And actually, in the beginning of my career, I actually carry one of those annoying briefcases every day. So I realized I don't even read what's in there when I go home. And then papers become a little bit irrelevant. So I live here full time. I'm married. I have two boys. My two boys are 8 and 10. They're the coolest little kids. I love raising them in the city. It's such a dynamic atmosphere for children. They're exposed to, the exposure that they have to culture, food, different ethnicities, like everything here. And I was telling you earlier, we're Yankee fanatics. Every free weekend we have. Every other weekend we have to be on the 4 train, go to Yankee Stadium. So it's just for us, it's a great, it's fun. It gives me an ability to work a lot. I can be home in 20 minutes, 15 minutes. Yeah. I can see them for a little bit. It's a great way to balance a demanding career and, being present for your family.
Which is amazing. I mean, we have kids of almost the same age. Mine are 12 and 9. And I found the same thing. I never knew that I would enjoy raising kids in New York City as much as I do. Yep. We live in Jackson Heights, Queens, which is unbelievably diverse and one of the most diverse neighborhoods in the entire world. And raising kids in that cultural diversity, and in this city that's so dynamic and there's so much to do. I never knew that raising kids in the city would be as much fun as it is. So
Yeah, totally. I totally agree.
there.
I never thought I would do it. I thought they would be 2 to 4 years old. We move to the burbs, get a house, have a backyard,
exactly.
all that stuff that you're supposed to do. And I'm like, I don't want to leave.
Right.
I'm
Yeah.
like, this is great.
Yeah, it's nice to get home in 15 or 20 minutes, or to be able to pop out and go up to the Upper East Side to see one of their performances at 12. And people sometimes think that New York is inconvenient in that way, but in reality, there are so many conveniences about how you can get around, how you can make things happen, how you can try some food in this neighborhood and then go to a show in that neighborhood, or things like that. It's really...
It's the best part about it.
Yeah, it's amazing. All right, so my last question to you. You mentioned you and your family are all Yankees fanatics. What is one of your favorite Yankees experiences or memories that you have?
So I would say the World Series we went to last year, but the Yankees lost. So that can't be it.
Yeah.
We created a phenomenal tradition. The last 3 years, we go to spring training. So I started going when my little guy, I think, was 6 years old. And every year we go down to Florida, we go for 2-3 nights, catch a bunch of spring training games. They met Aaron Judge this past year, they met Aaron Judge. They go for batting practice. I mean, it's the coolest. Spring training is meant for children. If you're a baseball fan, you're doing your kids a disservice if you don't take them to spring training at least once in your life. My favorite thing.
That's incredible. And that kind of tradition, I mean, those traditions those are the things that I remember as a kid with my dad, my mom, and I'm sure your kids will remember forever. I love that. All right, so Pierre, tell us how our audience can get in touch with you with all of the things that you're doing for our industry.
Yeah, so we're on social media. Our firm's at Romer Debbas. My personal one's Pierre Debbas, ESQ. And, where our website is incredibly informative, romerdebbas.com. It has bios on all our attorneys, media appearances, summaries of recent transactions we've closed, all our different practice areas. Obviously, my information's there. And then I spend a lot of my time teaching continuing education classes, as you were mentioning earlier. And myself, my law partner, Mike Romer, our continuing education partner, Neil Garfinkel, is probably here somewhere.
Yeah.
We formed the leading online CE provider on the entire internet for all of New York State, the Real Estate Center for Success.
Fantastic.
So if you go to recenter4success.com, you'll see all our offerings. And I do a live class every month on Zoom that's free. Our offerings online, there's a small cost to them. But in order to continue giving content to the community, every month I do a live class on Zoom for an hour and a half. And I always come up with a new topic. Again, keeping tabs what's going on in the market, try to tailor a class to that. Also with balancing the required classes, the fundamental topics. And so I'm all over the place.
Yeah.
I'm all over the place. It's very easy to find.
We appreciate it.
Yeah.
We appreciate that you're all over the place. Thank you again for being my guest on this live episode with so much commotion going on around us. I feel like we kept it focused. So thank you so much for being here. I look forward to continuing to collaborate with you.
Thanks, Eric.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
I'll give you my takeaways. So in today's conversation, one thing is clear. Power negotiation isn't a fixed asset. It's a moving target. The situation, the market, as Pierre talked about, the timing, the relationships that we do or do not have, and sometimes a single clause in the contract can influence or shift the power. And as skilled negotiators, we know power shifts with the options we have and the information we obtain that create those options. As Deepak Malhotra says, negotiation is an information game. So as a reminder, you can support this show by following us, subscribing, rating, and reviewing to the podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Just go to getmorenetwork.com, and there you can check out all of the amazing shows on the More Network, including past episodes of Shear Line. And we will have another episode dropping, tomorrow, but that'll be in the past when you finally hear this one. But keep up in touch with all of the Shear Line podcasts, all of the Shear Line episodes. And you can find me, Eirik Gislason, all over Instagram at archway.partners, as well as on YouTube and Facebook at Eric the Expert. You can contact the Excelsior team at Brown Harris Stevens by going to bhsusa.com. And you can connect with my coaching company, Archway Partners Coaching, by visiting our website at archwaypartnersinc.com, where you can find information about one-on-one coaching, our group coaching, and all of our courses. And one last final sign off, as I like to do, there's a key for every lock, but it's the right combination of grooves, cuts, and teeth that lift the pins and create the shear line. Until next time, keep turning curiosity into connection, mystery into mastery, and keep unlocking what's possible. Thank you for joining us, everybody.